Well, like I said, very excited to have our conversation this morning. My name is Logan Ensign, and I run our client solutions team here at Alloy. Joining us today is Alison Jones, and so we've known Alison here at Alloy for quite a while, actually, and she's just been a great partner to us. And so Alison is currently the VP of Operations at Billy, but before that, she served as the VP of Supply Chain at Edgewell, and then in a whole variety of roles at Mars. She really is innovative, energetic, a great leader, someone who understands the importance, necessity of data. So really excited to hear from her today. But we do want to cover just a little bit of housekeeping before diving in, and then we'll give Alison a chance to introduce herself and kind of her company. And so if you haven't joined us before, just a reinforcement here that this is going to be a casual conversation. We only have 2 slides. We won't be spending a lot of time there. Really like to orient this more around Q&A. And so please feel free to post questions in the chat, and we can address those as we go. We also know that some of you already submitted questions as you registered, and we'll be addressing some of those as well. So thank you for that. And then like I'd said, we'll be having a pretty casual conversation, and really looking to have more of a dialogue with folks here in the audience. So to start, we did want to give Alison some time providing more context on Billy and Edgewell, kind of strategically. So Alison, if you don't mind, you can introduce yourself, and I'll toggle over here to your slide.
Sure. Thank you so much. So as you stated, I joined Edgewell about a year ago, maybe a little bit more now, and I as the VP of supply chain. And as you can see, Edgewell Personal Care has a lot of brands that we all know and love, from Schick to Skintimate, Hydro Silk, in the shave category. We have Fem Care, so Playtex, Carefree, Stay Free, and OB. We do Sun and Skin, so some of you are very well-known sun care, or sunscreens, wet ones, which clearly was very, very popular during the pandemic. There's so many wipes now that you didn't even know you needed. And then grooming is a bit newer to us or to our portfolio, but certainly some very strong brands in grooming. And then Billy was acquired by Edgewell in late, I believe it was October, but late 2021. And we're actually in the process of integrating. And so what's very interesting is that found out when Billy joined, obviously they were using Alloy. We were very, very early in our journey with Alloy, but was very excited to have that as a combination, or I would say an added benefit to the integration.
Amazing. No, it is fun to see all the brands and great products y'all make. So well, excellent. And now also, and like I said, just 2 slides. I did want to give just a little bit of context around Alloy and what we're all about, and then we'll dive into kind of the meat of the conversation. So for us here at Alloy, we're all about this idea of what we call connected planning and execution. And so what does that mean? Well, starting on the planning side, we are really big believers that all your plans and forecasts should be created using the best data available. And so when we're talking about retail, when we're talking about point of sale, in a lot of cases, that means taking advantage of the actual point of sale, actual channel inventory to generate those plans, generate those forecasts. And so what we're finding is, the old model of using sell-in forecasts just isn't cutting it anymore, because as you see demand become less predictable and shifting more dynamically, it's just so important to be in touch with what's going on at the true point of sale. And so really, that's what we kind of bring to the table as we think about planning. When we talk about execution, what we also recognize is no matter how good you are at planning, at forecasting, you're going to be wrong. Hopefully not too wrong, but you are going to be wrong. And so Alloy helps folks really across a few dimensions and on the execution side when things don't quite go according to plan. And so we find that the teams spend so much time pulling down data, running reports, harmonizing that data, And we have tooling that automates all of that for our customers so teams can spend more time looking at insights and taking action. And then on top of that, we know that there's so much data available. And as you bring all that into a unified platform, we want to be able to help you get the most out of your data. So best practice sharing and templates that are retailer specific, more advanced analytics, alerting, so you can really be equipped to respond in as near real time as possible to what's going on in the marketplace. And we find that retailers and distributors give so much data, and they expect you to kind of come to the table and get the most out of it. And that's really what we're all about. So I've gotten pretty quick at that. Highly caffeinated this morning, so 60 seconds, and there we go. But I'm going to go ahead and turn our slides off. And kick off the conversation. So, Alison, question number one, like you mentioned, your relationship with Alloy has been pretty unique, and so we've known each other and interacted several companies, and so do you mind just giving?
This is now company number 3. If you
company 3. Well, so do you mind just giving the group an overview of what that history has looked like, and really how that coincides with some of your career development, or how your career's developed as well?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, and this was pre-pandemic, which I like to call in the before times and the after times. I was at a conference in Atlanta. It was a Scope conference, and it's a supply chain conference. And I was both an attendee and speaker. And so part of the conference is setting up time with vendors, different vendors. And part of me, this was my first time attending the conference. Let me say that. And it's a great conference, by the way. I've spoken at it a couple times. So when I say this, I'm obviously we're here now. So I felt it was a bit more like when you go on that vacation and are like, hey, you get a free night if you just come over here and hear about this great opportunity that we have. So I thought it was going to be, yeah, I'm going to go see, these vendors, but it'll, I'll just be doing my part. And I was really, I met several actually vendors that I ended up working with, but, I met Alloy and I was like, this is kind of the thing I didn't know I needed, and what I've been looking for. And I, signed up to talk more about it, obviously post-conference, because it's a very tight, almost like speed dating window while you're at the conference. And I really wanted to follow up more. And at the time I was at Mars. And I was like, man, bringing all this data together and really being able to make good decisions is what I really want to do. We weren't able to get it across the finish line at Mars. And then I ended up coming over to Alloy. And interestingly enough, I can't remember if like Jennifer pinged me on LinkedIn or I pinged her. And I was like, I've been looking for you because I want to do that. I want to try to, do what we were thinking about doing at Mars over here at Edgewell. And we were able to get it across the finish line, and we're very early in our integration when it was announced that we had acquired Billy. And then I learned very quickly that, and I was like, okay, how do we integrate Billy? And they're like, we're already using Alloy. And I was like, excellent. So then we were able to work to say, what does that integration, like there's the overall business integration, and what does the integration of Alloy look like? So 3 companies is where I've been. And I've, Alloy to me makes sense. Obviously you have to convince sometimes others, why am I investing in yet another tool? But I think once your teams get involved in it and, leadership gets involved in it, they really see that it does become a game changer in terms of data and analytics and just being able to have what I'll call database conversations. So. Mm-hmm.
No, thank you for that. You can't escape us. Yeah, we've been.
I know we keep bumping into each other, which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting too is, while you were at Edgewell, you kind of came to Alloy more with a supply chain set of objectives. Right. But what's interesting with Billy is that they were brought in by the sales group there. And so, can you talk a little bit about that dynamic of, okay, there's supply chain use cases, sales team use cases, and how that potentially helps you all collaborate a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, as I was working with Jennifer to try to, I would say, hey, how do I help everybody inside of my company see what I see, right? So Jennifer was giving me, different contacts across the business that had brought in Alloy. And in some cases, it was brought in from the sales side, in some cases from the supply side. So I hadn't even seen that even leading up to our use case. But what I would say is, yes, Edgewell was much more supply chain, but we were working with the sales team to say, hey, I think this could be a tool that you can use as well. And who I will tell you was really, really interested on the sales side, Edgewell, was our e-commerce and Amazon team that says like, hey, this would be excellent for me to just like really bring these insights. Billy, on the other hand, Laura Haftavani, who's the sales strategy lead, had brought it in, and she was really a big advocate. So what I'll say is like, even now with, we're Billy's in Walmart, obviously Edgewell is in many retailers, and e-commerce, brick and mortar e-commerce as well. And we're going to be launching in other retailers as part of our integration. And we've even, as recently as this week, been able to say like, okay, as we're transitioning, our systems, what does the sales team want to do in terms of, what inventory we have sitting as Walmart, because we have to do this blackout transition period. Is the sales team aligned to that? This is the supply recommendation. This is the sales recommendation. Does Walmart have enough inventory to support us as we're transitioning, systems? We're bringing Billy live into our SAP system. In addition, we've been able to use Alloy to help with like the burn down strategy, right? As we are, we're going to be doing our planogram sets. What do we need to do in terms of, getting out of certain SKUs and making sure we have inventory for other SKUs. So I think it's really allowed us to have what I'll call a database conversation that's not necessarily supply driven or sales driven, but really it's more customer centric and what is the right thing to do for the customer. But we're all speaking really out of the same hymn book, I guess, is what you want to do. And I think the other piece is that Alloy, again, is a tool that we can all use no matter our level in the business. And it's also easy for us to share with even senior leaders. So I'm just going to use the Walmart example, or use Walmart as an example. And their system or their data system is Retail Link. So people who are used to Walmart are used to going into Retail Link. But your VP or your chief supply chain officer or your VP of sales, they're not going into Retail Link and running reports. But Alloy can really be what I'll call that. And it's not to say you dumb it down, but it puts the data into a way, or it shows the data and it helps you show up in a way that it puts it into the language of the person that you're speaking to. So if I want to speak to supply chain, there's reports and dashboards I can use to speak to my supply chain lead or my chief supply chain officer, the same way I can use, maybe just with a little slicing and dicing, or maybe just a slight tweak to a dashboard. I can have those same conversations with my, head of sales. So to me, that's what makes it easy. Whereas, back in the day, pre-Alloy, you have to pull a lot of data, you have to dump it into spreadsheets, you VLOOKUP, sum if, all of these things, you got to be an Excel guru. And it's like, now you can really present the data in a way that helps you get to business decisions very quickly without necessarily, having to be an Excel guru. So that's what I love.
Yeah, no, I love that. Right. And I think we get to see that often is if you're all on the same page, looking at the same data, and then, even better, it's up to date, right? And so if an analyst is in Retail Link, putting all the reports together to share, and then a week later we go back, well, we got to do it all again, right? And so the nice thing there is it's dynamic as well. So
and one more thing, Logan, as well. Not only does it help you make the decision internally, but then when you want to share the results of that decision, or ask a question, hey, can we do this or that, or these are the scenarios, and you're sharing that with the customer, you are sharing their data. So I think that, again, becomes the other game changer is either what I've seen in the past is either we were using our own data and you had to manipulate it to mimic, I would say, the customer data, or you're using the customer data and then you have to mimic it to line up with your internal data, your internal SKUs, item codes, etc. So the thing I really like about it is, again, no matter who I'm talking to, if I'm talking to internally, I can be using our, item codes. If I'm talking to the customer, I can speak in terms of their language, their DCs, their inventory levels. So again, it not only helps you make the decisions internally, but it helps you put the scenarios on the table in the customer's language as well.
No, I love that. I love that. Well, and that dovetails nicely into a more general question. We like to hear from the audience, make sure people are paying attention. And so we want to run a poll question, if that's all right. And so, Chi-Chi, if you don't mind kicking that off, but we are interested in this idea, of enabling all team members. So kind of democratizing data, enabling all team members from, replenishment analysts and national account managers all the way up to the executive level. To do analytics quickly would be a game changer for my business. So curious if people share this sentiment. So if you don't see it, take a look, or if you do see it, take a look and give us your answer. We're interested in what people think. And we kind of led the witness a little bit. Maybe I should ask the question, Alison, before you made the sales pitch on
yeah. For me, really data becomes your currency. So, I don't want to lead anybody down a path. It's almost like when you do your engagement questions, I want you to vote for me, but I don't want to, lead you, lead the witness, like you said. But I do believe data becomes your currency. When you're having conversations certainly with your customers, and I would say even internally, to just help make decisions, scenario plan, and get to the so what. There's a bunch of data. That's your what. How do you get to the so what? So what are we going to go do? I'm very action oriented, so that's what I mean. What are we going to go do?
Oh, I love that, and I think a good number of folks said, "Hey, I think I agree with this concept, but I'd like to hear more about it." And so as we go, hopefully we can address that even more about this idea of, top to bottom, folks can have access to data at the granularity that they require it.
Right.
Awesome. Well, you had sort of alluded to this idea that retailers, they want you to bring them insights. And I think, one of the common concerns or questions folks have is, well, okay, I want to bring insights to my retailer, but they don't take my recommendations. So what would you say to that? Because ultimately the retailer makes the final decision. And how do you think about data and sort of the retailer dynamic there?
Yeah, so I'll address it from a couple of positions. So you're right. Your retailer is not always going to take your recommendations for various reasons, right? It may be because they're new in role. It may be because they really want to do some things a certain way. It may be that you haven't built the trust. It may be that, they're like, I don't know. When I look at your data, I'm kind of finding things different, but and they're not always going to take your recommendation. But here's the way I look at it. And I'm going to go back to like my manufacturing days. I used to have somebody that would stop by my desk all the time and they would be like, oh, I want to tell you this and I want to tell you that. And not so much Chicken Little skies falling, but it was always like this stuff. And I remember kind of looking over at my desk partner and saying, oh my goodness, they stop by and they want to tell me something all the time. And they said, one day they might save you. And I said, you know what, you're right. So it was really around, if you shut them down, they may come to you with some information that you may need from a manufacturing environment. And I kind of look at that the same way with our retailers, right? You're putting recommendations on the table, they're data-based, you feel strongly about your recommendation or you feel comfortable about it, and they may not accept it, but it may be that one time where you're really bringing an insight that really saves them. And that's going to really, help your relationship. It's going to help you build trust. And I think it's going to really put you in a position where future recommendations are going to be accepted. When I did support our Walmart business and I lived in Bentonville for 4 years, I lived there for 4 years. I had 4 different divisional replenishment managers that I work with. Okay. So you're rebuilding that relationship every time. But one thing that was consistent for me was the conversations were always database. I didn't have Alloy then, but the conversations were always database. Another thing when I lived in Bentonville was I was part of a supplier collaboration group where we were non-compete suppliers that were always looking at ways to, have better conversations with Walmart. Hey, what reports are you pulling out of Retail Link? How are you looking at the data? How can I best look at the data? To me, Alloy would have been a game changer for that conversation, because not only are we all looking at the data, but it's like, oh, here's a dashboard I've built, or here's how I'm sort of slicing and dicing it, as opposed to having to pull the data from Retail Link and be able to work that. but it would have been a game changer for us to, again, get beyond the data and to the how do we use this to really build our relationship with Walmart. And then just a key thing, and I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. When you're in Alloy, you are using the customer's data, okay? You're using their data. And so again, I think that is going to be the starting point of building trust, because you're speaking to them in their language. And it's the same way I mentioned, even if you're talking to the VP of sales, you're talking to your chief supply chain officer, or you're talking to your customer. What the way Alloy helps you is it helps you to speak in the language of your audience, regardless of if they're internal or external.
No, I love that. I love that. And we get to see kind of that opportunity every day, and how can we be good partners and strategic partners and analytical partners with our customers. Right. I'm curious again, and this is our last poll question, but interested, at Alloy, we're always interested in this dynamic of, how influential are folks able to be with their retailers. And so curious with the broader group, how often have you been able to use data to move the needle on your strategic relationship with your retailer? Yeah, and like Alison said, I mean, it takes a lot of investment, and retailers aren't always going to listen to you. I am interested. I mean, you've got Billy and Edgewell, pretty different just by size. Do you think that retailers, never or always or rarely listen to smaller companies? Like, how do you think about company size and that dynamic?
You know what? I don't necessarily think it's company size, because Billy was small, but very much Walmart was very interested in having them in the in their brick and mortar stores, right? Just because of the interest that Billy had generated, like online and the D2C space and social media and et cetera, et cetera. So there was very much a pull. So I would say in that case, Walmart would have very much been looking to partner strategically with Billy, which, like, how do we make this really big? How do we make this, really pop and really grow the category and bring new shoppers into the store? So I don't think it's size, but I do think, and again, I'm speaking from, my days. Mars is a very large company. Obviously Edgewell is very large. You have to be really innovative and fresh with your ideas. You don't want to get complacent because you are the big player, or because because they're looking for innovation. They're looking for disruption. They're looking for ideas, and how you can really move the needle for them as a retailer. And also, how do you look omni-channel? How are you driving customers to their store? So I don't think it's company size. I think, are you innovative? Are you using your data? Are you helping me grow my business? And really, I mean, you have to make your customer look good. And by customer, I mean your retailer. So
yeah,
but the results are up.
They are up here, and so it looks like over half say, hey, look, we're weekly or even daily bringing data to retailers to kind of give those signals and recommendations. About a quarter say I use point of sale data maybe quarterly and more formal CPFR. And then, about 10% say, okay, line reviews, we really go deep and use that data. And then about 10% like, look, we're not really scratching the surface on POS data. So, makes sense, right? And even in that first bucket of, hey, we're using data pretty consistently, I think folks are often looking, how can I be more effective? How can I be more efficient in those conversations? So thanks to folks who participated. Before we move to the next question, we do have a question I think is relevant. So someone had asked, do all retailers participate in sharing their data? So all customers, do they participate in sharing point of sale data? And so, the answer is, I mean, Alison, you can take that, or I can take that. I think the net of it is, yeah, the net of it is most major retailers will provide point of sale data, and the really big ones provide not just sales, but also margin, inventory, forecasts, their own sort of proprietary metrics. And so the vast majority, often it's sort of 80-20 or even 90-10, where you can get really rich, deep data But then there are some retailers that don't provide point of sale, but that list is getting smaller, by the month, by the year. I don't know if that's your experience or you can corroborate that, Allison.
Yeah, and again, I think it it becomes, I got to know how to go in and use Retail Link. I got to know how to go in the public system. I got to know how to go in the Kroger system. I got to know how to go, so it's you become, it really becomes tough, what I would say, to navigate the different systems, and so you end up getting kind of your subject matter experts. Like, here's this person is my Walmart or my Retail Link expert. This person, can go into Kroger and pull data. So again, I think Alloy takes away I don't want to say the need for the subject matter experts. Obviously, you still need to be able to know what you're looking at, but it pulls it into one format that allows you to, again, look at your business in a way that doesn't require you to have to learn all of these different systems. But yes, I mean, I've had to have, again, in the past, I've had to have here's my Kroger guy or girl, and here's my Walmart guy or girl. And if you needed something and it was kind of above and beyond, your capability to go in and just grab something quickly, they had to be the ones to go in and pull the data. So it was also very people dependent, I would say, on my side as well.
Makes a lot of sense, right? And we know that it's a moving target too, that metric definitions change and data transmissions change and portals change. And so just keeping up with all that is a job.
Right.
Awesome. Well, and then keep the questions coming, audience. And thanks for that one. So I do know that our audiences typically really value specific examples. So was hoping to kind of dig into some of those specific examples of the challenges you kind of were trying to solve with Alloy, and also kind of how we've lived up to those expectations. Would be interested to hear those.
Absolutely. So I'm speaking Edgewell right now. So when we brought Alloy in, one of the things we really wanted help with was in our sun care space. So as you can imagine, sun care is very seasonal. And what you don't want is at the end of the season to have a bunch of Hawaiian Tropic sitting on shelf, because customers are going to say, hey, can you come take this? And you get a lot of returns. And so one of the things we wanted Alloy to help us to do is to really be very intentional about how we were moving inventory throughout our network, so that, we didn't over inventory in certain places, and we made sure our inventory, because obviously we don't want to sell out in Florida, but you got a bunch of sunscreen sitting on shelf in, I don't know, North Dakota, and you're out of season, right? Nothing against North Dakota. But what we were able to do this last sun care season with Costco is we were able to use some of the insights to recommend like $300,000 more of inventory that we could put in, and it was very location specific. So Alloy was able to help us not only say, hey, we need to put more inventory in the network, but where would we put it into the network to avoid those returns, right? Not just flooding the network, sort of what I'll call, without really like the insights to go along with it. In addition, one of the other things we brought Alloy on was to help us with like phantom inventory. So where are we seeing that there's inventory showing in the system, but it's not creating the replenishment that we want at Walmart? So we were able to use Alloy to help us look at phantom inventory and look at, again, where do we need to be more intentional with our inventory? And we were able to drive $4 million of sales. And it's not so much the sales, but it was the right inventory going to the right locations. There's so many examples. The only other one that I'll say is, again, when you have this data, if you get into any type of what I'll call demand fluctuations, where you were seeing from your customer your demand signal was X, and then all of a sudden your demand signal goes to Y. We've been able to, again, use our Alloy data to say, hey, this was the demand signal we were planning against. Your demand came in, at a level above that, more than X%. And we've been able to use that to get exemptions, for example, for on-time and in full fees as well. So those are just, some specific examples that we've been able to use both within Edgewell and, even on the Billy side as well.
Makes sense. Well, next question here. At Alloy, I know I'd mentioned, we call ourselves a connected planning and execution platform. And we do that because we think it's important to have a common data platform where you can plan and then you can analyze kind of that execution progress against those plans and then make adjustments as needed, more in those short-term time horizons. And so what is your perspective on using the same source of data for planning and plan execution and adjustments?
Well, I think it's a couple things. And I say this, and I've said this directly to people that have worked for me before. And at first their feelings are hurt. And then I explain. I say, there's no value in you pulling the data. Okay. You as a person, right? Not Alloy, but you as a person. And they're like, what do you mean there's no value in me pulling the data? And it's like, the value is not in you pulling the data. And I mentioned this before. It's, so what are we going to do? You know, how do we get to decision-making sooner than later? And in today's world, things are moving so quickly. To your point, the data we pulled last week, by the time we have the conversation, the situation could have changed, right? So it's not only being able to pull data, again, making sure your data is the latest source of data and that you're able to look across your supply chain and say, what do we need to purchase? What does this mean in sales? Does it mean a sales loss? Does it mean we're going to be holding too much inventory? So you're able to make what I'll call really end-to-end decisions. That's one thing. The other thing is I think about Alloy, and I know this, you know, may oversimplify, but when I look at the dashboards, I think about it like your car, right? So if you get in your car, there's a lot of things on your dashboard, you know, your speed or whatever, but you need to be able to see that your gas tank is saying, I need to stop and get gas, right? You need to be able to see like, oh crap, I need more coolant. I need more oil. My engine's running hot, right? So there's a lot of things on your car dashboard. Not all mean you need to do something different, but you do want to know immediately when you need to do something different, okay? When do I need to stop and get gas? When do I need oil? Because not doing those things can result in catastrophe, right? So that's the way I look at it's like the dashboards are there to say, hey, my business is running smoothly. I'm good to go. Oh, I need to make a change on purchasing. Oh, I need to have a conversation with my customer around my POS data seems to be going up or down. But it really is about when do I need to being very able to quickly see that I need to do something different, and then being able to also quickly get to who do I need to talk to along my enterprise to help drive those changes or drive those conversations to get to the so what. So like I look at Alloy as like your car dashboard. If you got in your car and nothing was showing on your dashboard, you probably wouldn't drive anywhere. You're like, I can't drive like this. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I'm running out of gas. I don't know if I need oil. I don't know if I'm speeding. And that to me, it's like begin your day with data so that you can make decisions along your enterprise.
No, I love that. And so it's all about the so what, taking action, getting
Right.
insights. Yeah, yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. Well, I know that yeah, probably everybody on this call knows there's just a lot of discussion and interest in supply chain, right? And Alison, you're an expert and a leader in supply chain. You've worked at a good number of companies in a lot of different roles. And so I know folks would be interested in hearing your take on some of the macro trends, you know, a little more Alloy agnostic of okay, supply chain trends and kind of your take on what's going on and what you expect.
So, interestingly enough, I was thinking about this. What's different, right? So first of all, we know with COVID, the supply chain has just, been thrown for a loop, right? So I think it's a couple of things. I think it's, data is your currency. I say your health is your wealth, like data is your currency. What do you know? What do you see? How are you able to see it sooner than someone else? Okay. That is what we're looking at. The other thing is, as I look at, like, when we talk about what are the macro trends, like the impact of social media. I mean, we've had things, TikTok, for example. We've had things, that an influencer shares and all of a sudden you're sold out, things have been shown, not even social media, but I'll say your conventional media. We had one of our dermaplaning, for cleaning your face or smooth, getting your face smooth, show on Good Morning America, all of a sudden is shown out. So it's almost like, what are those other means of things that could be disruptive into your supply chain? I think it's the other thing is like how I think in the past, supply chain was like, okay, you move some boxes around and you get product to the customer. Now I think where we are with these macro trends, supply chain really has become more of a strategic partner. And back in the day, you may have said, hey, I want the cheapest supply chain. Doesn't have to be the fastest. I want the cheapest. I'm willing to hold inventory. Now it's just not that simple. You have to look at it strategically. Maybe the cheapest supply chain is not the way we want to go now. Do we actually need to have a little bit more diversification in how we are servicing our customers? Cutting down on lead times. Customers are wanting you to like make decisions and be able to be more flexible, more agile. We've talked about those things. So, having a supply chain that has now grown, like in this pandemic from 30 days on the ocean to somewhere upwards of 75 to 90 days, doesn't allow you to be as agile. It doesn't allow you to come to your customer with ideas that you can really take to market, that quickly. So now we're having to really look at the supply chain as a strategic enabler to our plans and how we're really showing up with our customers and how we're being disruptive. So one of the things somebody told me a long time ago, I'm going to say this, is we were talking about mentorship, and they say, you always look to mentors as someone who's like older or maybe been in the business longer than you. But I would say we need to really think about mentors that are maybe younger, that are on the social media, that are on the TikToks, that can really start to put some ideas around, like, how are people buying? My kids aren't watching TV and looking at commercials. I mean, they're not. What are the buying behaviors that we now need to be more aware of? So what I would say is, like, do you have a younger mentor, if you're in this space, that is really helping you think through where the next disruption is coming from? What is the next trend? How are trends even being defined, in today's world? And again, once you know that, then, Alloy can really help you turn that into actual like data that you can share internally with your customers and say, this is what we're seeing, and this is how we want to, build the relationship so that we help you, our customer, stay ahead of those trends as well.
Oh, great advice, Alison, and really interesting take on where we're at. So always great to hear your take on those sorts of things. Well, the last question we have queued up, and then we have some additional questions for you, Alison, from the audience. And then just as a reminder, if folks do want to ask Alison more questions, you can drop those in the Q&A bucket. But just more generally here, what is one piece of advice you have for companies who are looking to get a better handle on their supply chain operations?
One piece of advice. I mean, I've said it, like, I don't know how to reiterate it. Data is your currency. I mean, two things. One, what are your sources of data? Do you trust them? Does it take you too long to get data? If so, you have to figure out how to be able to get out of that data churn, I would say. And the second thing is really like, this is the time, if you didn't do it before the pandemic or during the pandemic, this is the time to really relook at your supply chain and say, who are we as a business? What do we want to be known as or known for? And does our supply chain represent that, right? Do we have the data? That's one. And again, I'm speaking from supply chain because there's a lot of different places in your business where you may evaluate this, but does our supply chain enable us to be who we want to be and how we want to show up to our customers? I think this is the time to reevaluate. The last thing is, what is the next big thing that's coming? What is the next big thing that's coming? I've said in supply chain, you have to be part geopolitical commentator. You have to be part weather forecaster. You have to be, you have to do all of those things. But it really is about looking at what is the next thing that's coming. I mean, who knew Brexit? You wouldn't be able to get, product out of the UK for a while. Who knew COVID was coming, right? But again, all of these things have said, war in Ukraine. I mean, you have to be like thinking through all of these things. What's the next big thing? Are we set up and prepared to see it, again, through data, and then to act on it?
Amazing. Well, excellent. Well, we just had two more questions wanted to ask you, Alison, that did come in from the audience here. And I think you partially addressed this first one, but interested if you have more color on what resources do you find best for kind of tracking consumer buying changes? And so, yeah, curious just from a resources perspective there.
Yeah, I did talk about that with, I think, the influence of social media. And, and I would say specific platforms within social media. So I mentioned TikTok, obviously we've even looked, I've even seen like where, say our spend historically may not have been as high. There was some in the social media space and how that's really moving. And I'm saying our advertising spend, for example, the use of influencers. So I don't think you can discount. They're called influencers for a reason, right? And I don't think you can discount that or say, we're going to kind of stick with traditional methods. That doesn't work. And you have to be very omnipresent. Like people are like just scrolling through, I look at my kids and I'm like, you're just scrolling through, like, are you really getting this? But the attention that is being paid is very short. So how do you capture, attention very quickly and make people want to click through or go to a store, order online or go to a store and really look for your product. So I think it's not underestimating that social media space and more importantly, the specific platforms. I've been told I'm old and nobody's on Facebook. The only old people on Facebook. So I don't know. I'm not going to say my age, but I still see things on Facebook and I still click through some of those links. But looking at what does your brand represent? Like who's your customer and where are they in this social media space? That's why I say it's really platform specific.
Makes sense. Well, and then I think our last question here, we haven't really touched on this much, but somebody says here, very interested in drilling down to store level to find insights. And then how do you execute against store level insights, right? And maybe this harkens back to your days in Bentonville, but curious as you think about, okay, we've talked about, single source of truth, collaboration, but maybe more on how you think about store level insights and take advantage of that.
Well, I'm actually going to give an example that happened just yesterday, and Alloy was able to help us. True story. So at Edgewell, the chairman of the board, his wife loves Billy, and she was in a Walmart in North Naples, Florida, and she's like, I can't find Billy. I can't find my refills for my razor. And I was like, went on Alloy, pulled up the refills, pulled up the store, and I was like, you're right. But, and then looked at the DCs that support that store. And was like, well, there's some in the DC. So we just need to do, push to the store, etc. It took literally, this is a true story. I think it took me like 30 seconds to just like bang, bang, bang. Refills, North Naples, Florida. Two things. One, I wanted to see, A, was there still no product at that store? The answer was yes. B, was there product in the upstream DC that could be pushed to the store? The answer was yes. And so we were able to quickly say, yep, thank you so much, chairman of the board's wife. We appreciate that. And you can have that, right? You can have, very senior level people in your business, be it the chairman of the board, the CEO that says, hey, I was at the store and I didn't see our product. And very quickly we were able to say, don't panic. Yes, we had some challenges, but yet there's product at the DC. We'll work, we'll send a note out to the customer, or sorry, to the retailer to get some product pushed to that store, and we'll do that. So 30 seconds worth of data, which I know historically I would have had to go in, do store DC level, tie everything together, figure out what's in transit. Alloy made that a 30-second, I'm gonna maybe say, I'll give you 60 seconds, 60-second exercise versus not. And so to me, it's about not only what I'll call the proactive, like, hey, how do you stay up on your business and you're able to use data proactively to have proactive conversations with your customers, but even when you get that fire drill or something that comes like out of left field, your CEO saying like, hey, what's going on in South Florida? Or, hey, I've been getting feedback that we don't have product in Texas, or, hey, what are we doing? There's a hurricane coming. What are we doing to make sure like we have this or that, water, bottled water, heading to Florida? You're able to very, very quickly have those conversations and get those answers. So I think the chairman of the board's wife she'll get her refills and she'll be
make sure she gets her refills there.
That's right.
That's a good story. Hadn't heard that one. So that's great. That's great. Well, hey, Alison, thank you so much. Such a great conversation. Love your energy and insight. Thank you everyone who hopped on the webinar, making time for us on a Thursday morning / afternoon. We will get out notes to everyone who participated today. But otherwise, thanks for joining us, and have a good rest of your Thursday. Oh, sorry, Wednesday. I've skipped a day here. Usually we do these on Thursdays. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Logan. Thanks, everybody.